The town hall had never looked finer. The platform at the end of it was backed by a showy draping of flags. At intervals along the walls were festoons of flags. The gallery fronts were clothed in flags. The supporting columns were swathed in flags. All this was to impress the stranger, for he would be there in considerable force, and in a large degree he would be connected with the press. The house was full. The 412 fixed seats were occupied, also the 68 extra chairs which had been packed into the aisles. The steps of the platform were occupied. Some distinguished strangers were given seats on the platform. At the horseshoe of tables which fenced the front and sides of the platform sat a strong force of special correspondents who had come from everywhere. It was the best-dressed house the town had ever produced. There were some tolerably expensive toilets there, and in several cases the ladies who wore them had the look of being unfamiliar with that kind of clothes. At least the town thought they had that look, but the notion could have arisen from the town's knowledge of the fact that these ladies had never inhabited such clothes before. The gold sack stood on a little table at the front of the platform, where all the house could see it. The bulk of the house gazed at it with a burning interest, a mouth-watering interest, a wistful and pathetic interest. A minority of 19 couples gazed at it tenderly, lovingly, proprietarily, and the male of this half-minority kept saying over to themselves the moving little impromptu speeches of thankfulness for the audience applause and congratulations which they were presently going to get up and deliver. Every now and then one of these got out a piece of paper from his vest pocket and privately glanced at it to refresh his memory. Of course there was a buzz of conversation going on, there always is, but at last when the Reverend Mr. Burgess rose and laid his hand on the sack, he could hear his microbes gnaw, and the place was still. He related the curious history of the sack, then went on to speak in warm terms of Hadleyburg's old and well-earned reputation for spotless honesty, and of the town's just pride in this reputation. He said that this reputation was a treasure of priceless value, that under Providence its value had now become inestimably enhanced, for the recent episode had spread this fame far and wide, and had thus focused the eyes of America upon this village, and made its name for all time, as he hoped and believed, a synonym for commercial incorruptibility. Applause. And who is to be the guardian of this noble fame? The community as a whole? No. The responsibility is individual, not communal. From this day forth, each and every one of you is in his own person its special guardian and individually responsible that no harm shall come to it. Does each of you accept this great trust? Tumultuous assent. Then all is well. Transmit it to your children and to your children's children. Today your purity is beyond reproach. See to it that it remains so. Today there is not a person in your community who would be beguiled to touch a penny not his own. See to it that you abide in this grace. We will. This is not the place to make comparisons between ourselves and other communities, some of them ungracious towards us. They have their ways, we have ours. Let us be content. Applause. I am done. Under my hand, my friends, rests the stranger's eloquent recognition of what we are. Through him the world will always henceforth know what we are. We do not know who he is, but in your name I utter your gratitude and ask you to raise your voices in endorsement. The house rose in a body and made the walls quake with the thunders of its thankfulness for the space of a long minute. Then it sat down, and Mr. Burgess took an envelope out of his pocket. The house held its breath while he slit the envelope open and took from it a slip of paper. He read its contents slowly and impressively. the audience listening with tranced attention to his magic document, each of whose words stood out for an ingot of gold. The remark which I made to the distressed stranger was this: "You are very far from being a bad man. Go and reform." Then he continued, "We shall know in a moment now whether the remark here quoted corresponds with the one concealed in the sack. And if that shall prove to be so, and undoubtedly it will, this sack of gold belongs to a fellow citizen who will henceforth stand before the nation as a symbol of the special virtue which has made our town famous throughout the land. Mr. Billson." The house had gotten itself all ready to burst into a proper tornado of applause, but instead of doing it, it seemed stricken with paralysis. There was a deep hush for a moment or two, then a wave of whispered murmurs swept the place, of this tenor: "Billson? Oh, come, this is too thin. $20 to a stranger or anybody? Billson? Tell it to the Marines." And now at this point the house caught its breath all of a sudden in a new access of astonishment, for it discovered that whereas one part of the hall Deacon Billson was standing up with his head weakly bowed, in another of it Lawyer Wilson was doing the same. There was a wondering silence now for a while. Everybody was puzzled, and 19 couples were surprised and indignant. Billson and Wilson turned and stared at each other. Billson asked bitingly, "Why do you rise, Mr. Wilson?" "Because I have a right to." "Perhaps you will be good enough to explain to the house why you rise." "With great pleasure, because I wrote that paper." "It is an impudent falsity. I wrote it myself." It was Burgess's turn to be paralyzed. He stood looking vacantly at first one of the men, then the other, and did not seem to know what to do. The house was stupefied. Lawyer Wilson spoke up now and said, "I ask the chair to read the name signed to that paper." That brought the chair to itself, and it read out the name, John Wharton Billson. "There," shouted Billson, "what have you got to say for yourself now? And what kind of apology are you going to make to me and to this insulted house for the imposture which you have attempted to play here?" "No apologies are due, sir. And as for the rest of it, I publicly charge you with pilfering my note from Mr. Burgess and substituting a copy of it signed with your own name. There's no other way by which you could have gotten hold of the test remark. I alone of living men possess the secret of its wording. There was likely to be a scandalous state of things if this went on." Everybody noticed with distress that the shorthand scribes were scribbling like mad. Many people were crying, "Chair! Chair! Order! Order!" Burgess rapped with his gavel and said, "Let us not forget the proprietary's due. There has evidently been a mistake somewhere, but surely that is all. If Mr. Wilson gave me the envelope, and I remember now that he did, I still have it." He took one out of his pocket, opened it, glanced at it, looked surprised and worried, and stood silent a few moments. Then he waved his hand in a wandering and mechanical way, and made an effort or two to say something, and gave it up despondently. Several voices cried out, "Read it! Read it! What is it?" So he began in a dazed and sleepwalker fashion. "The remark which I have made to the unhappy stranger was this: You are far from being a bad man." The house gazed at him marvelingly. "Go and reform." Murmurs. Amazing. What can this mean? "This one," said the chair, "is signed Thurlow G. Wilson." "There," cried Wilson, "I reckon that settles it. I knew perfectly well my note was purloined." "Purloined!" retorted Billson. "I'll let you know that neither you nor any man of your kidney must venture to—" The chair. "Order, gentlemen, order. Take your seats, both of you, please." They obeyed, shaking their heads and grumbling angrily. The house was profoundly puzzled. It did not know what to do with this curious emergency. Presently Thompson got up. Thompson was the hatter. He would have liked to have been a 19er, but such was not for him. His stock of hats was not considerable enough for that position. He said, "Mr. Chairman, if I may be permitted to make a suggestion, can both these gentlemen be right? I put it to you, sir. Can both have happened to say the very same words to the stranger? It seems to me—" The tanner got up and interrupted him. The tanner was a disgruntled man. He believed himself entitled to be a 19er, but couldn't get recognition. It made him a little unpleasant in his ways and speech. Said he, "Sho, that's not the point. That could happen twice in 100 years, but not the other thing. Neither of them gave the $20. A ripple of applause. Billson, "I did." Wilson, "I did." Then each accused the other of pilfering. The chair, "Order, sit down if you please, both of you. Neither of the notes has been out of my possession at any moment." A voice, "Good, that settles that." The tanner, "Mr. Chairman, one thing is now plain. One of these men has been eavesdropping under the other's bed and filching family secrets. If it's not unparliamentary to suggest it, I will remark that both are equal to it." The chair, "Order, order." "I withdraw the remark, sir, and will confine myself to suggesting that if one of them has overheard the other reveal the test remark to his wife, we shall catch him now." A voice, "How?" The tanner, "Easily. The two have not quoted the remark in exactly the same words. You would have noticed if there's been any considerable stretch of time and an exciting quarrel inserted between the two readings." A voice, "Name the difference." The tanner, "The word very is in Billson's note and not in the other." Many voices, "That's so, he's right." The tanner, "And so, if the chair will examine the test remark in the sack, we shall know which of these two is fraud." The chair, "Order." "Which of these two adventurers—" The chair, "Order, order." "Which of these two gentlemen—" Laughter and applause. "Is entitled to wear the belt as being the first dishonest blatherskite ever bred in this town, which he has dishonored, and which will be sultry place for him from now out." Vigorous applause. Many voices, "Open it! Open the sack!" Mr. Burgess made a slit in the sack, slid his hand in, and brought out an envelope. In it were a couple of folded notes. He said, "One of these is marked not to be examined till all written communications which have been addressed to the chair, if any, shall have been read. The other is marked, 'The Test.' Allow me, it is worded to wit: I do not require that the first half of the remark which was made to me by my benefactor shall be quoted with exactness, for it was not striking and could be forgotten, but his closing 15 words are quite striking, and I think easily rememberable. Unless these shall be accurately reproduced, let the applicant be regarded as an impostor." My benefactor began by saying he seldom gave advice to anyone, but that it always bore the hallmark of high value when he did it. Then he said this, and it has never faded from my memory: "You are far from being a bad man." 50 voices, "That settles it. The money's Wilson's. Wilson, Wilson, speech, speech." People jumped up and crowded around Wilson, wringing his hand and congratulating fervently. Meantime the chair was hammering with a gavel and shouting, "Order, gentlemen, order, order, let me finish reading, please." When quiet was restored, the reading was resumed as follows: "Go and reform, or mark my words, some day for your sins you will die and go to hell or Hadleyburg. Try and make it the former." A ghastly silence followed.